an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering What We Do in the Shadows, Season 2, Episode 5, Colin's Promotion. In this episode, we get to see what happens when Colin has access to as much power as he can handle, and he becomes a fucking madman. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Lauren for commissioning this episode and for her patience in rescheduling. Appreciate you very much, Lauren. So Martin says, I'm so happy to see you going over this episode. This one and the next are two of the best episodes of the whole series. Ooh, nice. Yeah, I really liked this one. I watched it actually for the first time, like way back, because it's been a minute between commissions for this show. I have the rest of season 2 has already been commissioned, and I think maybe a couple into season 3. So now we're going to get on kind of a steadier track. But for a minute there, it was very intermittent. And I watched it like with Owen as soon as I was able to. And to the point where when I saw that I was supposed to be covering it this week and I went and looked at the episodes, I almost went one episode past it because I was so sure I'd already recorded on this one. And then I was like, wait. No, I didn't. So this episode is such a, oh man, this is one of those things where I just want to take the link to this one episode in particular and send it to Rashawn and have her watch it, because I feel like it's the kind of thing that is going to hit really different if you are somebody who has worked in this kind of job for a long time. I have only worked an office job for a few months before getting canned, because as you can imagine, I am not well suited to the kind of like delicate sort of passive aggressive speech that is encouraged in an office environment. So I like know enough about the culture to get the jokes. Don't get me wrong. But I feel like there is a certain kind of visceral, like, oh God, that you would have if you had done this sort of thing for a long time, you know? And I really enjoyed getting we have had like episodes that focused more on Colin, but the one that I mostly remember is when there was another energy vampire that joined up and she fed on like pity, and it felt less like it was focused just on him and much more about the fact that there are more than one type out there and the way that they could potentially like coexist or not. This being just about him. And his attitude towards like his relationship with his roommates and everything, I found really interesting, because I couldn't have told you before this one how much he actually gave a shit about any of them, you know? And I think that it's a really good idea to have there be moments where they assume that they're being drained. And that's not what's happening. He's genuinely just trying to share something from his life with them. I could just see how that would be a problem and how insulting it would be when you're genuinely attempting to be vulnerable, share something, and you find out, oh, this is so boring to them that they think I'm preying on them right now. Like, what a bummer, you know? It's like being honest about being excited regarding something that you are super into, and a person who didn't know this was an interest of yours reacting as if you're like joking, you know, and then you have to be like, no, seriously, I feel very strongly about this. So anyway, I'm going to back up and start off the the episode from the beginning, because what we get is an interesting combo of plot lines. We have him getting his promotion as like the main story, and then we have the B story of the roommates all clashing because Nadja realizes that that her town was raided by Nandor when she, like, before she was born, or it was before she was born, right? And she hadn't realized it, but there's like this painting that they find. The whole thing starts because they're trying to redecorate. So we go back and forth between Colin dealing with his stuff at work and his increasing power, and this conflict that's happening between the roommates that he's also feeding off of. And that helps out his plot line. But also, I really do enjoy getting to see the fallout from Nandor's pillaging, because, you know, it's like sort of a throwaway joke a lot of the time, mentioning how many different wives he's had, or the places that he pillaged, and that one letter that he found where somebody was trying to like surrender on behalf of his people, and it turned out they never got the note, and so the guy wound up being killed and slaughtered along with like everybody else in the city. But I do really like this moment of it being a real high impact actual event that affected somebody's life who is still around. Oh, right. Martin says it was centuries before she was born. That's right, because she talks about how the people in the town like wind up looking really weird because he essentially like killed or took everybody who was able-bodied, and it's kind of an ableist joke, if I'm being honest, but overall I just really like that being addressed in a real way, because it's so weird. Nandor's transformation, he was this bloodthirsty monster who absolutely wreaked havoc everywhere he went, and seemed like he had very little empathy for people or any value on human life. And now he is this like weirdly delicate cinnamon roll type dude, still willing to kill people very much. But I would love to know more about that progression and how that wound up happening, because somewhere along the way, Nandor, like, I don't know if he read a self-help book or somebody sat down and talked to him and was like, dude, why do you pillage? Like, what is it about pillaging that appeals to you? I'm trying to figure out what makes you tick. And he really asked himself and was like, wow, why do I pillage, you know? But anyway, the whole, like, the way that Nadja figures it out, she's looking at this landscape and she realizes that it is her town's flag that is on the fire. And she says, why is Persian Frank Zappa in this painting? Because Nandor tries to be like, we don't even know that that's your village. And we don't even know that it's the village that I burned. And both times it's like, no, yeah, we do know. And I have to say, one of my favorite bits in this show is the way that they use art to like contextualize things, and how they alter art to make it look like our characters are in the painting or in the drawing or whatever. I went back and rewatched the original movie. And that was like 2 weekends ago, because I was really curious. I remembered really liking the movie when it came out, but I was like, I don't really remember how much of the movie is carried on into the show, or how much they just decided to sort of roll with and spin off of in a different direction? And the answer is, it's actually like, there's a lot of one-to-one similarities between the movie and the show. And that's not a problem. I'm not trying to say that this is a criticism or anything. And they use the same theme song, which I actually found really surprising as well. Because, like, a movie having a theme song to begin with, but it definitely did, and it was the same one. But they did this same thing with the artwork. And it's just so effective to me to demonstrate the lives of these people and how long they have been around and the variety of lives they've led, really. And there's even, like, Laszlo is in one of these paintings and he's doing the bunny ears behind somebody's head and claims that, like, that whole thing originated with him. He was the original bunny ears, like, creator. And that is part of what the opening credits do with this show as well. We get to see all of these, like, the evolution from drawings and engravings to works of art, these fabulous paintings, to then, like, actual photographs. And it really does do something to make you believe that they are who they say they are. It's a very shorthand, creative way of emphasizing not only how long they've been alive and how many eras they've lived through, but also how unchanging they are in the midst of it. There's just very little about their personalities that seems to have really grown all that much. And the attitude and the vibe in all of these images is fairly similar. Except for Nandor. I really get the feeling Nadja is pretty similar to who she was. Laszlo, pretty similar to who he was. Nandor, though, what's up with that? I want to know. So anyway, backing it up, as I said I would do and then didn't. The episode starts off with Colin gesturing to the camera guy to follow him as he goes off and feeds on the irritation of some people in the office. I love the way that he, like, stands up from his cubicle and looks around as if he's a shark zeroing in on prey. And he goes over to this file cabinet and opens it up, clears his throat. There are two guys at desks sort of behind him. And as he's looking through this file cabinet for God knows what, he clears his throat again. Another moment, clears his throat again. And this dude asks if he can get him a lozenge. And Colin says, no, thank you. And continues to clear his throat until he is interrupted and told that Laura would like to see you in her office. This is the kind of thing that I can see myself either completely ignoring or being ready to commit murder. And it's one or the other with me. Recently, Owen was just kind of like, how do you do that? Because I was reading something and I so totally tuned out all the background noise that Owen was talking to me and I genuinely did not hear anything. It was, I think I assumed he was on the phone and it just fell into the back. Didn't even hit or register. So it's the kind of thing where I'm really curious if Colin Robinson were around me doing this, would I even hear it? Because sometimes I can be so focused, nothing penetrates at all. But if you're not in the zone, if you're not focused on something, those little noises can make you want to rip your own skin off. And it just, like I said, for me, it's one or the other. There was a ceiling fan in our bedroom, and it finally seems like it just broke. But there was a time where it would go really, really steadily and quietly, and then all of a sudden it would start to just tink, because it would tilt this like glass shade that was over one of the light bulbs. It would tilt in such a way that the glass would just hit the metal of the holder a little bit. Tink, 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 tink. And I came so close to just pulling the entire fixture off the ceiling in one like Hulk moment because I couldn't. It's the smallest, most inconsequential sound. And I just, you know. So anyway, he gets summoned to the office. And he says, I think what's finally happened is they figured out I don't know what the hell this company even does. So what happens? We see him go in and he is being spoken to and he is saying, no, 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 you can't do this. And he seems genuinely distressed. He comes out and says, it turns out it was the exact opposite. They've decided to give me a damn promotion. This is not good. It's mainly about my friends, Nandor, Laszlo, and Nadja. I don't want to do anything that takes away from my roomie time. And then it's like the old adage, you know, coworkers die. Vampire roommates, they're forever. Now, here's the thing. 1, dudes who genuinely do not know what they're doing, especially white dudes like Colin Robinson, getting promoted after doing exactly nothing to deserve it, genuinely not even knowing what the company does. This is something I feel would resonate with Rashawn really, really hard, because there are some stories that she has told me of men who have been promoted ahead of her and then come to her with the most basic questions you've ever heard, making it very clear they are using her expertise to justify their own promotion while she continues to be overlooked. And it's infuriating. And there's really, if you are in her position, there is nothing to be done about it, because if you try and like point this out or do anything to get credit for it, it is seen as insubordination or a bad attitude or whatever. So this moment where he's promoted, even though he doesn't even know what the company does, really got to me, because I was like, this is just so much like, this is, I don't know if they are having this happen just as a joke or because they know how true this is. It might be a combo, but it's so true. So it's not even really a joke, you know? It's just the way the world is, and it's infuriating. Secondly, he's talking about this promotion possibly eating into his time with his friends. That is not how that works. If you work in an office and you are promoted, you get to start to like do low-key whatever you want. And granted, it does depend on the culture of the office that you're working in. But most of the time, if you get to a certain point in the company hierarchy, and it looks like based on what we see later of his promotion, he has, you can come in late, you can have long lunch breaks, you can charge things to the company credit card, you can take off early, you can work from home, you can do so many things that you would have been questioned up and down for or just flat out denied way back when, and now it's fine. So the idea that he would be promoted and have less time with his friends, that doesn't work. He would have, if anything, more time with them. And, you know, like, it just, that's the one thing that I wanted them to actually address that in the episode. I thought it would be part of it, that he would realize, oh, I get to go home early. Nobody cares. I left at like 2:30 yesterday. Nobody even noticed. And it never comes up. So that's part of why I was wondering whether him being promoted despite not knowing anything was just a joke or done with awareness, because I would have thought that part they would be aware of as well. And it doesn't really get brought back up again as part of the joke. So anyway, as it turns out, he gets home and is trying to share with all of them about how he got this promotion and he's trying to decide what to do. But they are so distracted by everything to do with the paintings and how they're like, you know, figuring out who's in what and the relevance of it all, that him coming in and talking about his promotion is just seen as straight up drain attempts. And Nadja actually yells at him that we like, first Nandor says, "This does not concern you." And then he says, "You're rearranging the paintings." Well, I'm pretty good with squares and finding ideal spots on walls. So if you need my help. And Nadja says, "We don't need your help, Colin Robinson." Just, yeah. So speaking of news, I got a big promotion today at work, but I'm not sure if I'm going to take it. It would definitely cut into our roomie time. And then she says, "However you are trying to drain us, Colin Robinson, just stop it. And yes, you can leave and take your self-portrait with you." Nandor calls it a self-portrait and hands it over, but it's of all of them standing together, holding hands. Guys, this was just so precious to me. This gave me like such Luna Lovegood vibes. And he says, "I made it on the Texas Instrument Paint Pro." I need to know, what is Texas Instrument? You know what? I'm looking it up. I hope that you guys will all bear with me on this. Texas Instrument Paint Pro, because all I could think of is Texas Instrument, like calculators. Oh, okay. So it looks like it's not necessarily even a real thing. Was this just, somebody is saying, it's not any significant product. There are various paint programs, etc. So yeah, it was just made up as the joke. And just the idea that he maybe like figured out a way to use a literal like calculator to do this art feels extremely Colin Robinson to me. So yeah, they hand him this painting. And he gets sent downstairs and he's obviously so hurt. He like looks at the camera and like tries to laugh it off like it's a joke, but you can see how sad he is. And then he says, yeah, the thing about being an energy vampire is that people will think that you're just trying to drain their life force. I wish people would understand I don't live to drain. I drain to live. And it's just, he follows it up with, it is draining for them, though. And there is something about him admitting that I really appreciated. He's like simultaneously going, it feels a little unfair and like I'm being misjudged. However, they are definitely being genuinely affected by the thing I'm doing. So, and I really like that. It's the kind of thing that I feel more people need to be able to admit that, yes, what you want from folks isn't unreasonable, but you also do have to understand that what you want may take a lot of like labor and energy, and people aren't always going to be prepared to do that the moment that you need it, unfortunately. And that maybe you're not intending something to be heavy and like emotionally labor intensive, but it can be anyway. Whether you intend it or not, that's not really like what winds up being relevant ultimately. So anyway, we cut to him then in his new office. I have an assistant, Joanna. So we get this adorable girl, Joanna, and he says, he's like coming over and asking her for copies, but not telling her what he wants a copy of. And at one point, he just calls her on her phone and says, "I'm watching you do more work." And all of this is him being really kind of like uncertain. He's posturing a little here because he doesn't know what he's doing. And I love this. I finally figured out what the company does. It's playground design and marketing, or landmine design and manufacturing. It's one of those. So he has to give his first presentation, and we see him doing this thing, and it's the most boring you have ever seen in your entire life. We have maintained guess the projector decided to take a bit of a coffee break, and everybody sort of grins and laughs politely, and he feeds on it. Now, what I thought from this thing was that he was going to start to realize that he could feed on a positive emotion like laughter. I thought we were going to get a turnaround in the type of feeding that Colin Robinson was doing, because he had tried that up dog joke, but it was pure irritation because people knew what he was doing. And instead, if he actually made people genuinely laugh, maybe that could be something. But I forgot, because again, not immersed in this culture, that they have to laugh. This isn't genuine laughter. This is the polite, oh God, kind of laughter of people stuck in a room when shit's going wrong and that guy is their boss. That's what's happening. So I went in a completely different direction with it, as I would, because honestly, that's low-key what I feed off of. So I'm just sort of oh, maybe Colin Robinson is going to pursue the same type of job description as I do. Yeah. So he then does the close-up joke. I'm ready for my close-up, because he's on the spotlight and it turns back on again. And he is out in the hallway with his eyes glowing. Did you see that? They were listening to me because I'm the boss. They had to listen. And we see him again talking to everybody who they're all doing a really good job of pretending to be engaged, and just all of the feeding that he is doing, the face that he makes, you guys, I cannot emphasize enough how much of a pervert he looks like when he is feeding. Truly. It's just, it's really giving pervert finally getting to see the girl take her bra off through her bedroom window. That's he's been waiting all evening outside of her window watching, and she's just been doing her fucking homework and on the computer, and finally she gets topless and he just is so excited. That's the exact face, and it's so unnerving and I hate it. Oh, it's so good. It's perfect. But yeah. So we see as this continues that the people in the room are growing more and more weakened. Initially, they're laughing, they're playing along, they seem to be as engaged as they can pretend to be. But then as it continues, he says something about a second slideshow, and you see them all actually starting to fall asleep. And he goes into the bathroom again, and he is so hype. And he says, I feel like I have the power of 100 cowboys running through my veins, which I love that that's the comparison he makes. 100 cowboys. Okay, sure. And then he, in his moment of total hype, just smashes his hands down on the garbage can, which crumples like a fucking beer can. And almost immediately after, somebody walks in and he has to explain that it broke because somebody sat on it. We have never seen this kind of strength from him before. So I'm already oh, wow, what? And he has never expressed any feelings of not being quite full, so to speak. It doesn't seem like he was aware any of this stuff was a potential possibility for him. And this really makes me curious because we've already talked a little bit about how we don't know Colin's like background. He had a grandma who he, you know, in the seance thing, he manages to like pull her up. And so we know that he had family. But when they ask him about like what makes him his only response is sort of, I don't even really know what my deal is either. So that sort of answers the question, I guess. If he doesn't know his own deal, where he's from, or like how he came to be, why would he know what is possible for him in terms of powers? Like, who has he had to model himself off of? So, yeah, as the episode continues, we get more and more like manifestations of different powers that are really, really fun, but also done in such a way as to just a little bit sort of undermine their awesomeness in a way that I really appreciated. So first, he begins to feed on everybody by calling like meetings. These little like performance reviews. He asks one guy to write a 2,000-page essay on why he chose to be a maple tree when asked what kind of tree he would be. And then he like just tells somebody outside to stop talking to his assistant. He calls somebody else and tells them to come in. And then when he looks at the camera with the face, because he's been feeding, in the past, it has been the pervert face. This time, we get the freezing face. This is what, like, his face here looks more like when you are so cold that you're starting to get genuinely scared that maybe something is going to happen. That kind of like, it's a sort of shock, and he shakes in a way that suggests it isn't good for him to be at this level, this intensity. It's going too far. So, oh my God, I love when they go back to Guillermo helping hang the paintings, and there is a nude of Nadja, and Guillermo is like, puts his hand right over her ass, and Laszlo says, "Get your hand off of my wife's ample but firm backside." There is something about how Laszlo is always like so into his wife that I just really enjoy. It's not that they're not like interested in fucking other people, because they both like, you know, they're very open, but every time it comes up, she holds up a painting at one point and says, "It's my vulva." And he just says, "It certainly is," with this like complete pride and just hell yeah, that I live for. It's so great. It's like, you know, people often talk about Gomez and Morticia being couples goals, and it does feel a little bit like that in a way. It's less over the top and not really like an imitation of that, but sort of what you feel that sort of relationship would be after hundreds of years. If it started off with that like complete adoration and intensity, it can't sustain itself. So it winds up eventually sort of coming to this like simmer in a really great place of like mutual respect and admiration. And I say mutual, really it's much more from him, because she is extremely aware of his shortcomings. But nevertheless, so at this point in their conversation, Colin comes in, and we notice as the audience that the door simply opens for him because both his hands are full. Nobody actually notices in the house. But so like, you know, already we've gotten the hint that he is making shit move without having to touch it. But he comes inside. Nadja asks, "How was your first day being the big boss?" She seems genuinely interested. And he says, "Like you give a shit," and then just walks away from her. Look, I really like Nadja. You all know. She's my fave. But the look of outrage on her face when he just straight turns and walks away is so good. It's like, because she was such a bitch to him, you know? And granted, we know about like the draining, and I get it, but she was very shitty. And so seeing him react to her in a way that to me feels slightly justified, the way that she just can't believe he would ever say this, it's delightful. And she says, he has never missed an opportunity to tell us how boring his day was. To which Nandor says he's a wild card. And Nadja says, what are you talking about? He's not a wild card. He's the card you get on the top of the deck that has the instructions on it, so you throw it away. Which, that might be the single most devastating summation of who Colin Robinson is that I have ever heard. There's been an uptick in memes involving Colin Robinson that I think are great, where it's just a picture of him like with the pervert face, and people use them as a reaction to comments or posts that are really fucking pedantic in a way that like, you know, you guys know about how Neil deGrasse Tyson just recently, within the past few years, became absolutely fucking insufferable, where he talks about like, a lunar eclipse is so boring. If you weren't told it was happening, you'd probably never even notice it, kind of thing. He is getting a lot of the Colin Robinson reacts that I have seen. And the idea that he's the card on the top of the deck with the instructions that you throw it away. Oh my God. That's so good. So he comes back in, and Nadja says, would you like to help us pick out a painting to put up? There's still a bit of space. He says, at first, no. But then, I've always been partial to this one. And he points to one without looking at it. I want this to be made clear. The whole time that he has been in the room, there is no suggestion that his eyes have landed on this painting once. So, here's my thing. 1, did he already know about it? Is it supposed to be an implication that his senses, he doesn't even need to look at things to know they're there, and he knows the painting exists and he can just sense where it is in the room, and he's like, this one? Or is the painting alerting him because it's the exact painting to choose to cause discord in the household for him to feed off of? That's my main question, is that it winds up being the crux of everything that happens later that he continues to feed on. Does he know that when he picks it? It feels like he does, but it's never actually mentioned or explained. And it's like, does he, if he does know, let's say that he picks it on purpose to cause issues, does he know consciously? Is there some sort of like aura a painting like would give off that's like, hey, pick me, I'm going to be a major problem for everybody and you're going to love it? Is it something that he can fucking feel like that strongly? Or is it just a sort of, the thing that kept coming up for me in comparison while I was watching this was the part in Order of the Phoenix where Harry drinks the luck potion, the Felix Felicis. And I had been really interesting to see what like great luck looks like when you write about it, because it can be a very tricky thing to pull off. And what Rowling did, and you know, asterisk, Rowling is a garbage monster, but what Rowling did was really interesting, where instead of it being like things just happened too hairy that were good luck. It was like he was following his gut on everything and not overthinking anything and just taking action and going, I want to go see Hagrid. So, yeah, I think I'm going to go see Hagrid, even though that's not what the plan was supposed to be. He was supposed to go talk to Slughorn. And instead, he's just like, I feel like seeing Hagrid. And he does that, and it leads him to everything that he needs to fall into place. He is having a conversation, and he just gets a feeling that he should, like, zero in on a certain topic. So that is sort of like the energy that I'm getting from Colin as this continues, is that the power is sort of feeding on itself. Like, it is helping him to perhaps unconsciously make choices that consistently piss people off throughout the day so that it can sustain itself. And again, I don't know if that's supposed to be what happens here. It's just very significant to me that he picks the painting. So it seems like it has to be something that he is like, you know, playing them for fools a little bit. But I couldn't tell watching even twice whether he knows what he's doing when he does it or not. And when he points to it, the painting just floats. It floats like a foot or two off the ground. And everybody seems to not really notice it. Like, we have Guillermo, who turns and looks at us with this expression of like, wait, what the fuck was that? And we have Nandor, who says he can do that. But he says it and lets it go. And nobody else seems like particularly bothered by it. And that was one of those things that I feel like you could either be like, well, they would ask, wouldn't they? Or you can assume they're not asking because it's the sort of thing where they're afraid that he's going to use that opportunity to like drain them again, you know? So Nadja picks up the painting and says, why have I never seen this one before? And Nandor says, we should get rid of it. Donate it to an orphanage or something, Guillermo. And he says it with this like expression, this sort of panic. And this is when Nadja says, it looks like the village I grew up in. And then we see her beginning to realize. One of her eyebrows goes up and her head like tilts in such a way. And we go to the interview with her where she is talking about how amazing the village was supposed to be long, long ago. And then it was destroyed by a terrible army. They spared only the softest brains and the stupidest bodies in the village. And their offspring were all wrong. Again, questionable joke, but what can you do? We will never forget that battle. It was very windy that day, and the leader of the army was on a very high cliff face, and he went, "You will never forget my name. It's..." We didn't get the name, but I know now. It's Nandor the Relentless, my pig shit housemate. So, this whole thing here is really funny because I was willing initially to think that Nandor didn't remember, genuinely didn't know. But on the rewatch, he's shifty as soon as she picks this painting up. He does remember, and he does know that it was him for sure. And all he's trying to do is cover his ass. Like, the first time I watched it, I was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt and be like, look, not that it makes it okay, but it was literally like 1,000 years ago. And he fucked so many villages up that not remembering that he fucked yours up, I could understand how that would happen. But no. On the rewatch, he clearly is aware. There's a literal painting, like, preserving this horrible day in memory for him, because that's how, apparently important it was to him. So he 100% absolutely knew and was just hoping that she wouldn't notice or ever find out, I guess. Here goes. This is like the equivalent of her like finding an old photo of his ex in like a sock drawer if they were dating, you know? And that's sort of how it gets treated later, because he talks about it like, oh, it was just a bunch of us guys out for the, you know, out on the town. We were very drunk. It was 600 years, like, you know, the sort of thing where I'm trying to make it that she shouldn't be this angry about me cheating on her or maybe having engaged in some like very questionable behavior years ago where, and this is something that really happens where you yourself have entirely moved on from that event. Even though you knew at the time it was fucked up, you just have grown as a person or your relationship with them has evolved and you don't even think about it anymore. And then they find something and their reaction to it feels totally out of proportion because for you, you have like coped with and moved on from the emotional fallout. And so them just finding this information and it being fresh and new to them, it's not hitting for you, you know? So anyway, yeah. Martin says, I think Colin already knew where the painting was, as in he'd seen it around before and just decided to point it out since he was pissed at them all and wanted to both get revenge and feed on them. Okay. So you, like, to further my question, Martin, you think that he consciously knew the painting and everything that it like represented prior to this? You don't think that there was any sort of supernatural, he is sensing where a source of drama lies in the room because of his abilities right now? I just want to make sure that I'm getting that right. And then he says, I love how Nadja complains to Laszlo about him stopping her from killing Nandor. Agreed. Because honestly, she is ready to rip his entire head off. Oh my God. I love that we cut down to Colin in his little basement room, listening to it through like the floorboards. And I love that the activities that he partakes in are so like innocuous that they can go completely unnoticed unless you're really paying attention. But y'all, he is literally sitting there with his briefcase open, just looking at a necktie that he has folded in this particular way in this empty briefcase. That's what he's doing, is just like arranging this necktie in it is nothing. It is nothing, but it's like a serial killer, something that a serial killer would do, you know? Martin says, yes, I mean, it could be supernatural, but I think it's funnier to imagine it's just a random stroke of luck for Colin to stumble across it. Okay. Personally, I like the idea that it's his power and that he could just be like, go up to random couples on the street and whisper in her ear, ask him about Julia. And she's like, who's Julia? And it just starts some shit and he can just go and get a coffee and sit down and watch it unfold. But that does sort of make him so OP. I don't know. Him being OP is kind of the point, though. I don't know. So, yeah. We've got no evidence that it was him, my darling. Then what the fuck is Persian Frank Zappa doing on a horse? And we zero in on him, and it's him in like the exact hat. And I love Laszlo's immediate turnaround. Yep, that's him. It's just total, you know? So she's running after him, screaming that she'll kill him. I will rip out every hair of your body. I am going to rip that man into shreds and make a dress out of it. And Laszlo was telling her, calm down. You're feeling murderous. And she says, you are supposed to support me when I want to kill someone. Not in this instance, my darling. And he's holding onto her foot as she floats through the air. This is good shit, you guys. Look, I have long maintained that any relationship, whether it is a romantic or platonic relationship, it depends on you feeling like the other person is on your team. And that is not to say that we can't misinterpret things sometimes and they are saying something because they're genuinely on our team and worried about us, but because it's something that we're sensitive about, we don't react well and think it means they're not on our team. There's all kinds of ways. But like when it comes down to it, you want somebody that is going to be on your side and feel like they're advocating for you and rooting for you. So this moment of her just being like, you were supposed to support me. I want to commit murder because he did something fucked up and you know he did. And you know it was fucked up. How the hell? And honestly, I see her point. They kill people all the time. So, you know, it's not that big a leap to just be like, killing him would be totally, that would be justice and it would be something that we would all just adjust to. But it is somebody that they're otherwise friends with. And probably she would regret it in the morning. So I see Laszlo's point. It's just the kind of thing where I'm like, I'm not really mad at her. Probably Nandor should suffer some more lasting consequences for the things that he's done. Because he was an absolute fucking, like, demon from hell. And he got eternal life and is, like, fucking living it up in New York, you know? Doesn't seem fair. Just doesn't. We cut to Colin, who is absolutely overcharging in the basement room. Just trembling. His eyes are so bright blue, he is shaking. And we cut immediately from there to him trying to do a like long distance voice conference. This is one of the best scenes. I mean, oh my God, talk about shit that hits. And when I say that, I mean like not necessarily for me, but I have been in this kind of situation before. And the best thing that I can compare it to is trying to show somebody who's older and not patient how to use technology. Colin's doing this on purpose in this scene to, you know, get a reaction from everybody. But if you have ever been in that position I'm describing, you know what it's like, where there's a person who is otherwise very intelligent, who is very capable of their, like, running their lives. And then you just try and show them the simplest thing. And they don't really pay attention, or they assure you they know. And then you have them try and do it in front of you and they completely go off and like do some weird fucked up thing. Or you leave them with the machine and come back and it's just like riddled with viruses and pop-up ads that weren't there before. And you're just like, what did you do? This whole bit. And we get to see like the camera panning around on everybody's faces and them all struggling to stay awake, or a couple of them we feel like I was like, they're really trying desperately not to laugh here. But yeah, we go to his office and he says, I've never felt so alive in my life. And he swipes his hand over his head. And all of a sudden he has a full head of blonde hair. And this is when he begins to talk about how he's like changing and becoming something different. When I said earlier how his abilities manifest in a way that feels almost like they undermine themselves, what I mean by that is this, and later on the flying. This ability, where he now has a full head of hair, that hair is awful, genuinely awful. So it's like we're impressed that he suddenly has this full head of lustrous hair out of nowhere, because that's impressive. But the hair itself looks terrible. And he's got like this weird widow's peak thing going on, so it almost still looks like he's balding in the front a little bit, in a way that just sort of makes you want to shave his head all over again, because it just doesn't look right. And then the flying, yes, he can fly, but it's literally slower than walking. He is swimming through the air, but there's no momentum being built up. It's just like he's pulling himself along the same way that you would if you were like lying on a skateboard and just pulling yourself along the floor, which is no faster than getting up and walking. So he's got these like powers that seem rad on the one hand, but when you like stop and look at them at all, they aren't really that exciting. It's just the excitement comes from the novelty of them, but not from what they actually materially do. And I thought that was such a good idea, a way to like give him powers and have that be exciting in its way, but then they aren't exciting enough that you miss them when they're gone, if that makes sense, because they do go. So he demonstrates for the cameras that he can basically like drain people at a glance. He doesn't even have to say anything anymore. And he throws one woman into the wall and then looks at the cameraman and nods to him, and that guy just goes down. And the last shot we see is of him walking away from the camera that's fallen to the floor. Very, very good stuff. And then we go to the attempt of Guillermo to mediate the conversation between Nandor and Nadja. And it's like, calm down, Nadja. I barely remembered what happened. It was so long ago. Also, I was very drunk. It was just 200 guys having some fun. And he says, I'm sorry. You're right. I'm sorry for doing my job. I'm an invader and I was invading. I adore this because that is the exact kind of bullshit response that I've heard from people that makes you just want to fucking strangle them. Oh my God, it's so well done. And like, just FYI, we don't get any resolution to this. This episode takes a complete turn because Guillermo notices here that Colin is feeding on them and that he is the one that's sort of instigating all of this. So I really do want to know how we're going to like reconcile that. But anyway, they all start to realize that he is draining them and that this is a mega drain. This is when we go to him swimming down the hallway. And they all get so totally drained that they can't even get up. And Guillermo is like, Nandor asks Guillermo to get up and put his neck in his mouth. And Guillermo can't get up either. I can't decide if he would have done it. I think he would not have done it. But I guess that's true. Martin says there's kind of resolution in the end with the altered painting. I suppose that's true. It's not really resolution in the way I want it, but what are you going to do? But yeah, so Nadja tries to like go down and talk to Colin in order to get him on a roll and walk away while he's in the middle of it to distract him. And when she comes down, he's shaving his head. And his head has grown to this like obscene looking size. And when she returns to the room, she has gotten old. He has drained so much of her life force that she's actually aged. And it turns out all of them have. It's spread across the house. So Guillermo finally gets up enough strength to leave, and he gets up and tries to walk out. And Colin splits into 3 people. And then we get the best turn of events where they each begin to annoy the other until they have fed on one another to the point of death. And I love when they're like, why are you doing this? And he just begins to list his grievances in a way that's even draining. So, yes, they eventually all drop dead. His roommates have to drag all the bodies out into the yard, and they seem actually sad about it. Like, Nadja's got a really, you know? And they stand by his graveside and talk about how sometimes when he was trying to drain them, they were actually interested. And they didn't want to tell him they were interested because then he'd stop. Just like little stories like this. I love, we're burying by his favorite piece of fence. We saw him here a couple of times. I don't know. I just love it. And all of a sudden he sits up and it turns out he is alive. I just wanted to hear my eulogy. And he stands and then says to his other selves, come on, guys, get up. And then realizes, oh, no, okay, they're actually dead. And we cut then to him starting at a new company where he got fired because people were so drained, nothing was getting done. And he's walking into a new office and he's got a box of stuff. But it turns out he doesn't actually, he didn't get hired here. He just shows up. This is a very George Costanza sort of vibe, and I am really into it. Like, the whole concept of simply showing up and making like you work here. I love it. And he asks one guy, how do you feel about conservative AM radio? My Lord. I found a place to embed myself for the next couple of years. And, yeah, that being how it ends, him getting fired, that's pretty good shit. So we go to the credits and then there's a little mid-credit scene where this is when we get Laszlo touching up the painting in a way to make us both happy. So first, fix the clock tower. And then we have her laying on a bunch of bodies in the photo with her boobs out, as she mentions it. And Laszlo says that I'm riding in to rescue my lady wife. He's painted his own face on the face where Nandor's was. And then when Nandor says, where are you? Laszlo says, you're in there, old chap, and points to a burning building. Tough luck. And that is the end of the episode. So I guess that is a kind of resolution, but I really do want Nandor to genuinely be I guess it was pretty fucked up how I just continually raped, murdered, and pillaged. But it's okay. It's fine. We're never going to get what we want in these cases, So anyway, all right, I'm going to wrap, but thank you again very much to Lauren for commissioning this. Appreciate it. Thank you, Martin, for feeding me some information and some theories. Appreciate that as well. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.